Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking an epic historical siege that was broken not by some massive military might, but by 4 starving outcasts. Imagine the ancient besieged city of Samaria. Dust is just hanging in the still air, the entire city is literally dying of hunger, and right outside its massive stone gates sit 4 men that society has completely forgotten about.
Why are we sitting here until we die? Man, just listen to the profound desperation behind those words. This pivotal question is spoken by one of those 4 forgotten men sitting outside the gate at dawn. I mean, they're weak, they're wrapped in torn clothes, and they are completely out of options. That single question perfectly sets up the sheer life or death stakes of our story before we even take a look inside the city itself. Section 1. A city on the brink.
To really get why these men outside the gate were so desperate, we've got to look at the bleak reality inside the walls of Samaria. Inside, hunger wasn't just an event, it had become a way of life. The source material paints this incredibly grim picture for us. Empty baskets rolling in the wind down totally abandoned market rows, and folks pulling up completely dry buckets from stone wells. The siege had dragged on long enough to push even the strongest men to their breaking point. The city guards, they're practically swaying from weakness on the walls. And over in the palace, King Joram is tensely pacing by his window. From the everyday civilian to the king himself, the entire city had reached the absolute edge of hope.
Section 2. A desperate decision.
So let's shift our focus back outside the gate. Twilight is falling over the valley, and these 4 lepers are weighing their impossible options. You know, their logic was tragically simple. As one of them basically points out, if we go into the city, the famine is there, so we die. If we sit right here at the gate, we also die. The only wild card they have left is the enemy camp of the Syrians off in the distance. They figure, hey, if the Syrians let us live, we live. If they kill us, well, we were gonna die anyway, right? It's a grim calculation, but it actually prompts them to slowly rise, leaning on one another, and walk away from the city gate toward the darkening valley and those flickering torches of the enemy army.
Section 3. The empty camp.
Walking into that dark valley had to be terrifying, but what happened next is just truly shocking. The men expected to bump into heavily armed hostile soldiers. Instead, they're greeted by this eerie, absolute silence at the edge of the camp. Let's pause for a second and look at how this builds, because just hours earlier, a massive event took place that our 4 outcasts knew absolutely nothing about. While the Syrian soldiers were just sitting around their campfires eating, a distant rumble started up, and then it grew. It turned into this deafening sound of chariots, horses, and a massive army. The commanders completely panicked. They thought the king of Israel had hired the Hittites and Egyptians to attack them. Soldiers literally dropped their spears mid-grip and sprinted into the darkness. But here's the wild part. Not a single unseen force actually attacked them. Not one weapon was ever raised. It was just sheer, blind terror that caused an entire mighty army to vanish into the night.
The contrast here is just staggering. Think about it. Just a short walk away from families in Samaria staring at empty tables and completely dry wells, there is this extravagant, untouched abundance left entirely unguarded in the Syrian camp.
The true scale of this event really hits you when you look at the sheer volume of wealth and supplies the enemy just left behind. Picture our lepers cautiously pulling back a tent flap and just freezing in their tracks. Inside, they find bread, wine, dried meat, all of it laid out untouched. After starving for so incredibly long, they finally eat, probably with tears in their eyes. And as they move from tent to tent, it gets even crazier. They find rows of calm tethered horses, gleaming silver cups, and literal piles of gold coins just left on tables by the fleeing commanders.
Now watch how their mindset rapidly shifts here. At first, obviously it's all about survival. They eat. But then human nature kind of kicks in, right? They start nervously hiding some of the silver and fine garments for themselves. But suddenly one of them pauses. He looks at the others and says, "We are not doing right. This is a day of good news, and we are keeping silent." It's an incredible moment. Their mindset shifts from desperate self-preservation to this profound realization of moral obligation. They know, without a doubt, they have to return and save the starving city.
Section 4. The king's doubt.
So, the 4 men rush back to the city gates just as dawn is breaking, shouting this unbelievable news up to the gatekeepers. But when the news finally reaches the throne room, King Joram, who is battered and deeply suspicious from this long, grueling siege, immediately assumes the worst. He narrows his eyes and asks one very understandable question. Is this a trap? They know we are hungry and hoping we will chase a lie into an ambush. The king's despair is so deep that he can't even accept good news when it's literally right at his door. He's absolutely certain the Syrians are just hiding out nearby, waiting for them. But this intense suspicion actually forces one of his officers to step forward with a pretty bold plan. Let's send out a small scouting party. Send a few guys on horseback to verify this wild story before we risk opening the gates and exposing the entire city.
Let's look at the investigation. 2 riders mount their horses, the massive city gates creak open just barely enough to let them out, and they gallop rapidly across the dusty valley to see things for themselves.
As they ride, the scouts start seeing undeniable evidence of a massively panicked flight. The road stretching out in front of them is just totally littered with discarded garments, dropped shields, and abandoned weapons. It's playing out exactly as the 4 outcasts described.
Reaching the tents, the scouts dismount and walk through this vast, empty camp in just stunned silence. They confirm it. There is no sign of an ambush anywhere. They immediately jump back on their horses and race towards Samaria with absolute urgency in every single stride. Section 5. The Final Restoration.
The scouts arrive back breathless, and their report spreads through the city like wildfire, triggering an absolute explosion of relief. You can almost hear the crowd gasp as their disbelief instantly turns to cheers. And then, for the first time in this entire grueling ordeal, the massive gates swing fully open. The joyful people pour out of the city and rush across the valley toward the abandoned camp. In a single night, that crushing famine was completely broken. Families who were staring at empty tables just a day ago are suddenly gathering massive sacks of grain. Mothers are tearfully feeding their children fresh bread again. The city marketplace bursts right back to life with merchants exchanging goods. And as an elder in the crowd notes with total awe, the words of the prophet Elisha, who had quietly watched the suffering earlier, were fulfilled exactly as he had spoken.
But honestly, the most beautiful detail of this entire historical account is looking back at our 4 unlikely heroes. As the whole city celebrates with food and laughter, the 4 men stand quietly and humbly at the edge of the celebration. They exchange this knowing glance, their faces weathered, but completely at peace in the golden morning light.
They stepped into that dark valley expecting certain death. They thought they were walking straight into the hands of a violent enemy, but God had already gone ahead of them and totally cleared the way. Which really leaves us with this final thought for today. Sometimes, the very place you fear the most is exactly where your greatest provision is waiting. So what terrifying unknown do you need the courage to walk toward today?